When we ask parents why they choose us, the single biggest reason they give is inspiring teaching. And securing those inspiring teachers with relevant degrees in their subjects costs money. The state sector crisis in teacher recruitment and retention can only be solved by serious money, and VAT on a majority of schools is not going to fix it. And it is the case that private school fees were effectively double state school spending levels in the decade between 2009 to 2020. And it sounds damning.
As mentioned earlier, I went to a comprehensive girls' school in North London for secondary, and it was truly diverse. Doesn't mean it was always easy, but it did mean that it was never dull. The pupil intake, it ranged from girls who were solidly middle class to girls whose parents were mechanics to girls who were in and out of the care system, girls who were refugees. And I will never ever forget the time when in year 7, I made a friend and I brought her back for tea, and it turned out that my mum was her social worker. And I'm sure that for many parents, that would fill you with dread and terror. The idea that you're sending your kid to attend a school and other children may have come from literal war zones, both at home and abroad. But retaining a system of social apartheid where kids from disadvantaged backgrounds don't get to breathe the same rarefied air as kids from more privileged ones, that is the thing that I find terrifying. Because what I learned is that kids from those tougher backgrounds, they have so much to give. Because I learned a lot about life every day. And I learned a lot about life from the girl who'd come from Somaliland, and she was having to learn English. Both the Queen's English that she learnt in her English lessons and the North London kind, which we were teaching her in the playground. And we know from study after study that socio-economically integrated schools produce better results for disadvantaged pupils. And I think it's good. I think it's an inherently good thing when people from challenging backgrounds aren't abandoned by those from more stable or more affluent upbringings. Because what kind of message do you think it sends when you say that those kids, I mean, also kids like me, were simply too dangerous, too rambunctious, and too poor to share a classroom with? But in addition to that, I think that diverse state schools, they produce better learning environments than the socially impoverished experience at fee-paying schools. I think that you learn more about the world, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about the people that you're, I think, privileged to share a country with. And I don't think it's right that for many amongst those 74% of privately educated judges, maybe the first time they encounter someone who went through the care system is when they're sentencing them. When Nicky Morgan became Education Secretary in 2014, not one single minister in her department had attended a state school, and that same year, the Department of Education proposed a £200 million cut to local councils' education funding. And between 2010 and 2021, per pupil funding for state schools was cut by 14 percentage points. And I don't think that those things exist separately from the private school system. I think it was made possible because of the private school system. Because you're not going to be punished by the voters you count on if they've got a safer option for their kids and they don't have to send their kids to the schools which have the crumbling concrete or are beset by strikes or have teacher retention problems. The existence of the private sector for wealthy parents means that governments can get away with murder in the state sector. And it's just so much easier to impose unjust sentences, write unjust stories, and craft unjust legislation when you've had little contact with the people who'll be most affected by it. And look, here's the simple thing that I want to say. If private schools didn't confer an unfair advantage, nobody would fucking pay for them. The existence of private schools wages war on meritocracy because it tells kids that having money will get you further in life than having talent, and that there's no need to understand the country even if you want to be part of the class who gets to run it. And I think that state schools at their very best can represent what the country can be in miniature. Socially mixed, a level playing field, a place where people from radically different backgrounds can learn from one another. And I think if we were serious about meritocracy, which you've all just told me you believe in, You would actually want to weaken the private school sector. You wouldn't want to let them get away with tax-exempt status. You wouldn't want to let them get away with presenting themselves as charities. And maybe you wouldn't want them to exist at all. But until that sweet day, where we no longer have fee-paying schools in this country, marring the principle of fairness that we should all live by, I'll settle for scrapping the VAT exemption. So please, I implore you to vote against this motion.